In other news we're tracking for you this afternoon, government has increased its pay offer to public sector workers from 5% to 5.5% in a bid to end wage talks that began back in September. It's now up to the unions to either accept or decline this deal. Let's bring in Claude Naiker. He is the Public Service Association's General Manager. Claude, good afternoon to you. The Public Service Association earlier said that the unions will push for 6% for the next financial year. What about this 5.5% offer?
Yes, a very good afternoon to you. Thank you for having me. Yeah, it seems like we've come to almost a conclusion because the employer has tabled a 5.5% increase for this financial year, indicating that it's their final offer. What it basically means is that once they've appended the signature to the draft agreement, unions have 21 days in order to either accept or reject the agreement. We set out at 7.5. Employer were at that stage at 4.7. They compromised and went to 5. We revised our mandate to 6%. At the end of the day, we worked much closer than where we had started off. At the moment, it's 5.5% on the table. It's a 3-year agreement entailing that for the financial year 26 and 2027, the increases will be based on inflation with a proviso that if inflation drops below 4%, the increase will be 4%. Mm-hmm. If it escalates above 6%, then the increase will be 6%. But if it's anywhere between 4 and 6%, that's what employers will receive. So it's a multi-term agreement. It's a 3-year agreement. Coupled with that, there's an increase in the housing allowance, as well the medical price, medical inflation rate, as far as medical subsidy is concerned, for the outer years, that will increase by 0.5%. There's also increases in some of the allowances, like danger allowances. So it's a coupled package which we now have to take to our members. We will be balloting our members as early as Friday. We have 21 days to either accept it or reject it. I think a lot of compromises have been made by both sides, including the state and the unions. As I said, we're much closer to each other, and hopefully that we can strike an agreement as quickly as possible so that employees, if they do accept the increases, can be implemented with effect from 1st of April this year.
Claude, the Finance Minister is set to present his budget speech in sort of mid-February this year. And Enoch Godongwana has previously said that, the latest offer, the latest demand by public servants may pose a threat to ambitions to rein in spending, particularly in the midst of South Africa's rising debt levels. What's your take on that score?
Absolutely. Look, we're not oblivious to the economic situation of the country, but one must take in mind, let me give you a perfect example. Medical increases that increased by almost 13.4% in average this year in January, which almost scuppered the salary wage negotiation talks, because employees will take home less than 2,000 Rand, or basically a net pay of 2,000 Rand less. So if you look at the increase in medical aid, as opposed to what we're receiving as far as salary increase is concerned, I think much cognizance must take in the fact that over the last few years, we haven't received an inflation-linked salary. In fact, 2 years we received the cash allowance as opposed to a pensionable salary increase. So all in all, compromises from the state, compromises, big sacrifices from the unions as well. So I think all in all, if we do strike a deal, it's a win-win situation for all, taking into account the fiscal of the state, taking into account the net salaries of public servants on the whole. So I think we perhaps, if you want to put it this way, we reached a middle point of negotiations where both parties had to concede, but at the end of the day, we reach some sort of compromise on both sides, and hopefully that we can strike a deal itself without having too much arm for fiscal, and employees can obviously take home something that they can actually meet their daily expenses, taking into account the rising cost of medical aid, transport, and basic commodities like food as such. So I think all in all, I think it was a fair compromise by both sides, and hopefully that we can strike a deal, an agreement, so that everybody is settled for the next 3 years as such.
Yeah, I remember, Claude, that the PSA last year said that it was inundated with calls about this almost 13.5% increase by GEMS. So that is now in place.
It's actually in place. No matter how much we canvassed with GEMS, the Board of Trustees of GEMS has implemented a 13.4% increase. I think it's absolutely ridiculous in this time and age to implement a 13.4% increase, taking into account inflation, taking into account what public servants are receiving on the table. As I said, it almost played a dent or scuppered the wage talks. We were prepared to walk away from wage talks if the employer doesn't come up with a sizable increase to try and offset the increases by GEMS. Last year, they increased it by 9%. This year, double digit, and it's an average of 13.4%. As I said, a family with 4 dependents, the increase was tantamount to almost 2,000 Rand, which is quite exorbitant if you take into account today's inflation rate and the cost of living itself. But hopefully, if members do accept the 5.5%, it will cushion some effect of the GEMS increase, and then members will be slightly happier than what we set out when we began with wage talks as such.
Yeah, huge pressure on consumers all round. Claude Naiker, let me thank you for your time this afternoon. He is the Public Servants Association's General Manager. Government now increasing its pay offer to public sector workers to 5.5%. And of course, it's now up to unions to accept or reject this agreement.